It's Tips from the Top Floor, episode 911 for August the 3rd, 2022.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, alright, from the top floor.
Hey, hello, welcome. It is Chris. This is Tips from the Top Floor, the longest running photography podcast on the planet. Good to be back. It is episode 911, and I have, a nice mix of things that are at the periphery of photography as usual. Let's kick it off with infrared, and especially with the James Webb Telescope, because I'm a fan. I'm such a fan, and it is interesting to see what it can see, because, well, it does infrared photography, and infrared, and yes, it's photography. There's a sensor in there, and the sensor is very, very sensitive in the infrared part of the spectrum, that part that we can't really see with our eyes, and it is cooled down to, I don't even know, 7 Kelvin, something, anyway, very, very low, so that it can detect these minute infrared traces that happen when things expand very fast. There's a so-called redshift, and it shifts into the red and then into the infrared. And there's this one picture, I found this, I don't even know, I think on Reddit or somewhere, and it's just mind-blowing because it compares NGC 7496, that's a galaxy, and it compares that with Hubble's picture of that. And Hubble's picture is already impressive. And then it fades over to the infrared version. And then all of a sudden, in the areas of that picture where you didn't see much because those were obscured by gas and dust, those then show to be, those light up brightly and show to be star cradles, which, very, very cool. In that context, there's a nice XKCD comic strip. You might know XKCD. The nerds know XKCD. Randall Munroe, and he has a very nice take on a lot of things. He made a comic strip of 3 panels. Just click on the link in the description. But pretty much he says, they say the best camera is the one you have with you. It turns out they are wrong, and then puts a picture of the James Webb Telescope there. Yeah, it's kind of the best camera in some respects. Of course, I won't want to do street photography with it, but it's impressive. One more thing from James Webb, and that is interesting in and of itself, because it has to do with resolution and things, because the comparisons that you see between mostly Hubble and James Webb is resolution comparisons. And we've seen those first images and a few more since that are all very impressive. And someone put together a zoomable view of the Stephan's Quintet galaxies. There's a set of 5 galaxies. And they made it like zoomable inside a viewer in a browser for the very simple reason that the picture in itself is 12,654 times 12,132 pixels. That's 153 megapixels. And it's definitely a composite of sorts, but it's impressive to see these kind of things. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Photography. So I have a good friend, John Miller. You probably know him if you've been listening to this show for more than just a few weeks. And John and we go back and forth on various things online. And we just the other day, we had an interesting little discussion. It started off with a quick look at the Insta360, their new 1-inch edition, Insta360 ONE RS, which is one of these 360-degree cameras. Very good one. I think probably among the best ones at that. And that was in the context of me trying to figure out a good solution that for the Eastern European road trip documentation or vlogging about that. And here's the discussion that came out of that. So we start off on the technical side, and John asks me, like he's been eyeing it as he's curious about the low light performance. It's a 1-inch sensor, even though they're not really 1 inch. So I'm asking, but is it truly 1 inch? And he looks at it and at a picture and says it's bulkier than the 361X and X2, which is the earlier models. And then I talk about me going the opposite way for my upcoming Eastern Europe trip vlog, which, if you watch the vlog videos, is iPhone only, but in a very interesting way, because it's 2 cameras in 2 directions filming at the same time, and then I edit it on the iPhone, put it all together. It's a low that's not even a low tech approach, because there's a heck of a tech in these iPhones, but it's an approach, a minimum approach, a minimalist approach. I think that's the right term. So I'm putting that together all on the iPhone. It's a good exercise. The technology is there, and I don't have to buy a new expensive device, because at this point I'd rather keep my finances under good control. So and the goal I have, and we're still in that discussion, is I said my goal is under 20 minutes of post-production per video, while it still is presentable and on the iPhone, and then we go back and forth, and then of the it's the discussion switches over to more of a philosophical one, because John then says, my dream is to push that even further one day, do a trip without feeling the need to document and just be 100% present in the moment. He's putting a smiley behind it, so that's kind of, tongue-in-cheek, but so my answer is that's preposterous. Nobody can afford so much luxury these days. And then John says that I think the key sentence here, I'm sitting on the deck at the cottage up in Maine right now. I keep thinking, how can I take photos of this to make people realize how wonderful it is up here? Heidi and I, that's his wife, were talking about this yesterday. You take a photo and it looks like garbage. Then we realize that the magic is 90% the smell of the air. At dinner, my aunt has been burning balsam incense sticks to keep the mosquitoes away. It gives me a very powerful sense of being in Tibet or in the Khumbu, which is up in Nepal. I mean, totally visceral. When the technology arrives to add smell as metadata, then I'll probably drag it out to Everest again, like with the 3D and the 360, and film some more material. So I sat there thinking about that, the being there, and how limited photography can be, and so I came back with every improvement in capture and playback fidelity will make it more real for the recipient. We're slowly inching forward, but still only somewhat poorly capture and reproduce 2 senses, that being vision and acoustics. Until then, the job of photographers and videographers will be to fill in the blanks with skill and knowledge about how to dock with the recipient's neurons in a way that yields the maximum result at the moment. And yeah, that was one of those realizations that I kind of knew this, but just thinking about this again, we do only cover very limited senses as photographers. As videographers, one additional sense. As photographers, well, it's just a snapshot of the moment, and it is interesting to think about the implications of that, because you have well, if you want your photos to click with the recipient, if you want them to go, oh, that's awesome, then you will have to fill in those blanks that are there by a lot of the senses not being in a photo. And I think that's where the real challenge lies if you want your photography to click. Well, first of all, in adding those senses, you will have to replace certain things with certain other things. And there's not a fixed recipe there. That is something that you will need experience for. But also it helps to know who the recipient is, because if you want to click, if you want that photo to click into a receptor, it's almost like drugs, you know? You have a drug and then you have receptors in the brain and in organs and so on. And if those drugs fit well into those receptors, then they can do their work. And with a photo, it is, I think it's similar, because everyone has receptors, and those receptors are, and we're talking stylistic receptors, we're talking content receptors, and each person's receptors are different. They might have a general. They might be generally informed by the culture they grew up in, the part of Earth they grew up in, the community they grew up in, and so on. But then everyone's individual receptors are different. I'm forming this thought as I talk. This is not scripted, so I'd have to think more about this. This is an interesting way of looking at it. Drugs and receptors. Maybe there's something to that. So yeah, I'll think a bit more about that, and let's go on to the next topic. Yep, there's more. Of course, the other thing, visual art related thing that is big in the news and that I've been talking about left and right, is DALL-E, being OpenAI's image generator, and it's hard to understand what that thing does. I mean, you give it words. You give it a prompt, you say, photo of a hedgehog riding a bicycle in the forest. And it'll spit out a bunch of images that are usually very good. But how does it get to that? How does it make that? Is it taking, I don't know, bits of images that is seen before and putting them together in a collage and then smoothing them out and stuff? Because that's not how it works, but it's easy to think that that's how it works. And it's a good, I found a good video that explains what these things do. I mean, DALL-E is one out of, I don't know, there'll probably be at least 5 big ones in half a year. And Vox made a video actually before DALL-E was released, and they go into interesting depths about how these things work without making it hard to understand. They do a really good job explaining what these things do. And then for a bonus treat in the show notes of that video that I'm going to link, there's also another video linked about how what it means for artists. And that's a very good discussion as well. So check that one out. And while we're talking about DALL-E, I want to point you to a little Twitter account that I found really funny. Twitter.com/PizzaDALL-E. PizzaDALL-E, which is a Twitter account showcasing DALL-E by generating pizza-related pictures, and I like it. And the prompts that go with it. So here's a few examples. A black and white photo of a grotesque pizza monster at the July 4th ball in 1921. An astronaut in the middle of the desert at sunset eating a delicious cheese pizza. A photo of a pizza in quantum superposition. That one I found interesting. And a Raphael painting of a Madonna and child eating pizza. So lots of pizza related stuff on Twitter, on the Twitter account PizzaDALL-E. Check it out. And that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. Again, you can leave your feedback at tfttf.com/hi. That's tftttf.com/hi. Of course, I'd be more than happy if you could support the show on Patreon. Starts at $1 per episode, and yeah, it is really appreciated.
I remember that you said
Oh, we got some feedback. Let me read the feedback that came in through tfttf.com/hi. Hampus writes, "Hi Chris, hope everything is well with you and good luck with the road trip. All is well with me, but sadly I've not been able to keep up with TFTTF lately, so no feedback on the actual episodes here. But I noticed that episode 906 and 909 are up on YouTube, but not 907, 908 and 910. Will they all be there, or are they not coming in that format?" Can you hear that? That's someone mowing the lawn outside. That is very helpful. Okay, windows closed. It's summer. It's hot. Hampus, thank you so much for the feedback. 907, 908, and 910 have been on YouTube. You just couldn't see them because their visibility was still set to private. My mistake. I'm still getting back in the swing of regularly posting. And when this is how it works. When I pre-release something, scheduling it on YouTube is a manual process, and I simply forgot. So they are now online and visible, all of them. And by the way, I appreciate your feedback, because I never really know if anybody actually appreciates the episodes being on YouTube. It was only meant as a secondary outlet for people who can't get to the podcast at work and so on. So I guess I'll keep doing it. And I'll try to be a bit more diligent with the YouTube releases. Second piece of feedback on specifically on episode 910. I'm looking forward to this recording. I just listened to 908 today. Thank you. I have missed you and your better half, Bill. Bill, I really appreciate your feedback. Speaking of my better half, Monica, yeah, I'll try to get her back on the show one of these days. And then last but not least, feedback by David. Absolutely wonderful to hear TFTTF again. Your refreshing look at photography is greatly appreciated here in Victoria, Australia. You were looking for feedback on rebranding. I have a very simple suggestion. To me, TFTTF has always been the show about all things interesting in photography. The keyword is interesting. To me, TFTTF does keep in touch with the mainstream, but it looks the mainstream off, but looks at the more interesting and curious byways, but never so far down the rabbit hole you can't return and not relate it to the mainstream. If you listen to your own recording, you will find that you do use the word interesting quite frequently. And then he continues, "The Romanian trip sounds fantastic. I'll be following your adventures closely, and if the workshop goes ahead, maybe looking to join you next year if it is running. All the very best, David." Interesting. Yeah. I do love to use that word, I guess. It probably has a lot to do with my personality structure. I get bored easily, and honestly, I'm a bit over the megapixel race and the frames per second race and the eke out even more sharpness race and the ISO 100 million race. So yeah, that's how I keep myself busy. TFTTF, the show about all things interesting in photography. I like that. It has quite a ring. That goes high on the list. And any other suggestions for little tagline rebranding? TFTTF.com/hi is the place to drop that. And regarding the Eastern European trip, you will find a link to a YouTube playlist in the show notes where I document the scouting trip. So that's a great place to follow along. I've also added some more detail on the current state of planning on discoverthetopfloor.com. That's where my workshops used to live and coming back. So that includes a way to get your name on the official list, because I've started a list now. So if you're interested, or if you think you want to join, some more details are there, not fully fleshed out, but probably helpful. So that's where you want to look, discoverthetopfloor.com. All right, and that brings us to the end of the episode. Thanks for listening. Again, contact at tfttf.com/hi. You can write, you can record, you can send things there, you can attach a voicemail. Tips from the Top Floor is on Twitter at tfttfphoto. The show is at tfttf.com. And Again, support the show on Patreon. That is most appreciated. Yeah.
I remember that I told you there'd be sunshine after rain.
Make sure to go out and take loads of photos.
After pain. I remember that you said
Be extra nice to each other.
as it seems
And as always,
easier to leave
happy shooting.